Okay, I'm gonna show you guys how a boxing fight goes like versus a UFC fight.
I got my jab going. I got my outside foot position. I can throw my jab now. Okay, half the round already gone. I'm winning this round now. Let me clinch. Another jab. And throw my hook. Okay, there. That's the round done now. That was a 10-9.
And this is how a UFC fight goes like.
Back kick. Leg kick. Uppercut. Now I'm gonna take my takedown. I'm on the ground.
So Canelo vs Crawford just went down, and Terence Crawford won the fight. He was more powerful, and his footwork was better. And yeah, I guess congrats to Terence Crawford. But I'm not talking about the fight. I'm talking about the fact that now, today, officially, the UFC has overtaken boxing. I think that fight has proved that the UFC is a way better product and more people watch the UFC. And yeah, first of all, they posted the embedded, like, do you know like those UFC embedded? There was embedded for boxing. They posted on the UFC channel. So boxing literally needed the UFC to promote their sport. They even got Dana in because they know how big of a name Dana is and stuff like that. And they put one of those boring ass boxing promos and stuff, it's not going to be as entertaining. And I was looking at comments from like boxing fans like, "Hey man, boxing is way better, man. Boxing is way better. UFC, that's your trash, man." But now I'm laughing at those comments because that fight was pretty boring. I didn't personally find it boring because I was actually interested in the stylistic matchup between Terence Crawford and Canelo, and how they would deal with each other and stuff like that. But for the average viewer, that must have been very boring. The fight was definitely entertaining, and I know that if I found the fight mid, then 99% of people, they found the fight like absolute snooze fest. And I think boxing has quite a lot of problems, and these problems are causing the UFC to take over. So yeah, let's get into it. The Canelo and Crawford card had like 2 finishes, and UFC not to even know how much finishes it had. So in the UFC, there's way more chances of finishes and people getting knocked out and stuff like that. Where in boxing, like I knew before the fight that it was gonna end in 12 rounds because every single boxing fight goes to decision after 8 or 10 or 12 rounds. These guys can't knock each other out, whereas the UFC, people get knocked out all the time. It's very rare to see someone like get knocked out in boxing. The only time people get knocked out in boxing is when in rare occasions, and also when a prospect is fighting some pizza delivery guy who does boxing as a hobby. Those are the only times you see knockouts in boxing, whereas in UFC, basically there's a shit ton of knockouts, submissions and all that stuff, finishes and stuff. And I feel sorry for you boxing guys, man. You just know it's going to be a decision every single time. But one of the reasons is the 4-ounce gloves. The 4-ounce gloves in the UFC allow for more knockouts, and also there's less protection. Like, a lot of the time in boxing, those 10-ounce gloves and stuff give you so much padding that your defense needs to be less sharp than in the UFC. And obviously, boxers have better defense than UFC fighters, but you're more likely to get hit with those 4-ounce gloves and stuff because there's like less protection and stuff like that. So more shots get through in MMA, you're more likely to get rocked, more likely to get knocked down and stuff because there's less padding and stuff. Another reason is that in boxing, the main events are like 36 minutes. That's way too long for a fight. Like a UFC main event is 25 minutes, 5 rounds, 5 minutes each, whereas a boxing main event is 12 rounds in each of 3 minutes. So a boxing main event is 11 minutes longer. And also, I don't like how there's so many rounds in boxing because like you're gonna lose track of who won this round, that round, because there's so many different rounds and stuff. Boxing should have 5 minute rounds and stuff like the UFC does. And maybe if the rounds are longer, they'll allow the fighter who's getting momentum to continue that momentum for 2 extra minutes and stuff, and then maybe something interesting can happen in those 2 minutes. For some reason, UFC fighters with 4-ounce gloves are less scared of getting hit than boxers with 10-ounce gloves. And these boxers don't ever take much risk, I don't ever see. Like Crawford and stuff, I mean, when Canelo was starting to get peppered by Terence Crawford in the close range and stuff, towards the end of the fight, Canelo was just like, I give up, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this guy's power and stuff. And there were such low clean shots that whole fight. You could probably like count on your fingers how many times each guy landed clean on each other. While in the UFC, guys are way more willing to put their chin on the line to land something. I know UFC fighters are like worse strikers and boxers and like worse at striking and boxing and stuff, but I don't know, man. I think like this, like boxing is like these guys just don't want to get hit, and they're like too technical. Oh, I'm gonna get hit. I don't want to get hit. I gotta have my left foot on the outside and win the outside foot position, and then jab and then clinch. And it's like, no, UFC fighters, we're gonna fucking go for the overhand right, leave our chin in the air, then go for the left hook, leaving our chin in the air and stuff, but it's gonna make a more entertaining fight. So yeah, I don't know what I did there. I'll give it to boxing. Your guys' fighters are actually better than UFC fighters. Obviously, because boxing's more evolved and stuff like that. But the average boxing fighter has a way more fight IQ than the average UFC fighter. And UFC fighters brawl more and think less in the octagon than boxers do. And maybe since like the sport of boxing is like developed so much, and like fighters are like way smarter and stuff, has like caused like a lot of the fights to be very boring and stuff. And maybe it's also with the 10-ounce gloves and stuff, and the rounds being so short, all that stuff. But boxing is just very predictable. Like 99% of the time, the favorite in boxing is going to win the fight. The spit just fell out there. Let me repeat that again. 99% of the time, the favorite's going to win the fight. And they're probably going to win it by decision. No matter how much money you can make in boxing, if you just say this guy's going to win by decision. Like, I think I should be doing that, because I think I'll like actually start to be able to make out the hood finally. But yeah, just boxing is very predictable and stuff. While the UFC, you literally do not know what's going to happen most of the time. I know Crawford versus Canelo was a very unpredictable fight, but because they're the two best in the world. But because boxers like fight guys who aren't on their level and stuff, and boxing is like a very narrow skill, then it's like very predictable, and you know who's going to win before they step in the ring. And Canelo Alvarez versus Crawford is supposed to be the biggest super fight in boxing history, maybe even all time, and it didn't live up to the hype, the fight. Whereas I think Ilya Topuria versus Islam Makhachev is an MMA equivalent of Crawford versus Canelo, and we all know Ilya Topuria versus Islam Makhachev would be 100 times more entertaining than Crawford versus Canelo. And some of the title fights, like juicy title fights coming up, like JDM versus Islam and Cyril Gahn versus Tom Aspinall, like we all know those fights are going to be, there's a high chance those fights are going to be extremely entertaining. I know there's a chance that those fights are boring and stuff. There's always a small chance of that happening. A recent example of a boring fight which didn't live up to the hype was DP versus Hamza Chimaev. But we know those fights. There's a very high chance whether the fights are going to be absolute bangers and stuff. Whereas in boxing, you can't guarantee a fight's going to be a banger, and it's actually quite rare that a fight's a banger. The last two boxing bangers I remember is Terence Crawford versus Spence. Like I don't know how long ago that fight was. That fight was maybe even 10 years ago, but that's like one of the last ones to remember. And also Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. That was actually all three of those fights were really good. But besides that, in boxing you don't get these absolute bangers and stuff, and it's mostly gonna be boring most of the time. I also think boxing fans are very insecure about the UFC. For example, Terence Crawford and Canelo, like the two clips I've seen about them when they're talking about UFC, they're like trying to put MMA down.
You know, hey, you know, a lot of MMA guys, they drink a lot, so.
Boxing's not as popular as it used to be anymore, right? UFC is really popular. That's because of Dana White institution. And how do you do that?
Hey, Max. Boxing is always bigger and big.
I notice like lots of boxing guys like they're insecure about the UFC, and they try and pretend like it's nothing be taken serious and stuff. It's just like these like backyard brawlers and stuff. But I think they're just insecure about the fact that they see that the UFC is becoming way more popular, and people are starting to get tired of boxing, and people are liking the UFC more, and the UFC is getting way more fans. And maybe boxing could have more fans because of the older generation, like all the unks and stuff watch boxing. But like, if when those like unks start to die and stuff, then UFC is gonna have more fans, because UFC younger people watch UFC, and old unks at the fucking cookout, they watch boxing. Like, hey man, Larry Holmes' jab was amazing. Like those type of people watch boxing. So yeah, boxers are like, they're insecure about the UFC and stuff, and they like try and put MMA down and stuff. But it's just fear. So yeah, UFC is taking over boxing. It's official from this day that UFC is a superior sport. And yeah, boxing obviously had a great history. It was great while it lasted and stuff, but officially today UFC has overtaken boxing. So yeah, it's Boys House for MMA. I'm out.